All right, mate. I feel like I'm gonna be like David Letterman saying my next guest needs no introduction. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
how did you get started on this whole fitness trend?
Oh man. I mean, I've just always been a gym nerd, just always involved in weightlifting. The love of the game, I guess you would say. It's always been there from a young age. And then really I try to just tailor my career towards that. I've been involved in the sport of Olympic weightlifting since 2005, but just like most athletes, always had some small aches and pains, small injuries here and there. So it led me down, rather than being more of a sports performance coach for a career, I wanted to go a little bit in a different direction and try to be someone that can help others through those similar aches and pains and injuries. So that's really what got me into the physiotherapy field, but just always wanted to stay within the field that I love, which is lifting heavy weights, and it's something that I enjoy doing on a regular basis and helping other athletes continue to do what they love as well.
Yeah, man. Like it's funny how many people have the same story, right? They come into the sport, they just get so passionate about slanging and banging some barbells, and then it's like, oh, my knees hurt, my shoulder hurts, or whatever. What's going on? I want to learn
Mhm.
a little bit more, and you kind of just get addicted to the process, right? And learning new things, and
Yeah.
yeah, mate. You can see from a trained eye, you can see you've come from that background.
Hmm.
But now, like, it seems like you've done so well of like being able to make something seem so simple that is actually a little bit more complex, and being able to spread it more towards the newbies, shall we say. What made you want to
Yeah.
kind of go down that route?
I really think it sort of goes back to, and what's it? I think it's like the Albert Einstein quote: "If you can't explain it to a 4-year old, you yourself don't understand it," or something to that degree. You know, whenever you're coming up in the physical therapy world, and this goes for any type of medical or professional rehabilitation field, everyone talks in this jargon that only they can understand.
Yeah.
So I think and many people listening to this probably have had a similar experience where they go to a medical doctor or a physio or a chiropractor, and they're explained their injury, but in a way they're like, I don't understand what they said. They used a lot of bigger words and it didn't set in. But when you go and you talk to your weightlifting coach, your powerlifting coach, you connect with them. You use similar jargon. You're explaining things in ways that they understand, because that's what it takes to actually make physical changes in whatever you're doing in life.
Mm.
Well, I wanted to sort of take that knowledge and just ability that I already had, because I was a weightlifter ever before I became a professional. So I wanted to be able to still use the knowledge that I had and the way that I communicated and take that into the physical therapy, physio world. So that's why a lot of the stuff that you can see on Squat University, whether that's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, anything, I try to use language that everyone can understand. Now, obviously, I have to be able to use some anatomical or biomechanical language here and there, but I try to explain it in a way that anyone, regardless of your educational background, can go, that makes sense.
Mm.
Because without understanding, there can be no empowerment. So I need to be able to explain things to people where they go, oh, that's why my hip hurts. That makes sense. I've never had it explained to me like that. Now, it has to come with that really in depth understanding and background. That's why, I mean, I went in college for 7 years and I continuously read research like no other every single day of my life. I mean, it's just something that I literally devote everything to. But in the same sense, then I need to go, all right, how do I contextualize this in a way in which Johnny, the 19-year-old power lifter who has a high school background, barely any, college, like, how's he going to understand this? How's it going to make sense in his mind to where he can be like, okay, my hip hurts. Here's why it hurts. That makes sense. This is what I need to do to get better. And I think that's where the challenge has always been, but something that I enjoy doing. Again, it's just like weightlifting or powerlifting, it's a process of learning how to better control your body, how to produce better strength, how to recover better. Well, in the same way, creating content is very similar in that it's a process, and you're constantly trying to learn, how can I get better at explaining what I'm trying to get across to people in a way in which they can understand. Because sometimes it's difficult on social media when you only have 30 seconds with an Instagram reel. a minute with a regular post, or sometimes there's longer Instagram TV videos, but most people don't take time to watch a full video,
Mhm.
you know, like to actually get your point across, contextualize it appropriately, and not lean too far to one way or the other, where people could completely misconstrue what you're trying to say. So it takes time to try to get your message appropriate for the individual.
It's a really hard art form to be able to grasp, but it's also so vital in the whole coaching, physical therapy scene. Like
Yeah.
being able to. Obviously, you need the base knowledge, right? We need we need to understand what we're talking about, because if not, we're kind of shooting from the hip blindly. But
Yeah.
then you need to be able to communicate it effectively to the person in front of you or to the person on the other side of the screen, because we're effectively changing their behavior and making them change something to get a positive outcome, granted, but we're wanting them to do something that we want them to do. So we need to be able to, break it down to a level and communicate it with language where they're like, oh, okay, yeah, now I understand. And yeah, something that Squat Uni is done so well is do exactly that, because I've spoke to so many people, and it's always come up, right? Oh, I saw the Scott University post. I was like, okay, like continue, like carry on. And it could be a 14-year-old kid who's kind of just getting into it and was like, oh, that thing that you said to me like last week, Alex? I was like, yeah. And it's like, oh, I saw this from this place called Squat University, and it like makes complete sense, and it kind of like marries up. I was like, okay, cool. Like at least you're like, seeing it from other angles and more
Yeah.
material out there. And then you kind of like flick up a post. Then a 65-year-old lady who's never been in a gym before is still like, okay, I get it now. And I think, yeah, like it's an art form that needs to be tinkered with like all the time. Like you said, like every day you're having a little bit of a play around with, but communicating to people is a hard art form, right? Like
It's
verbal,
very true.
non-verbal, it's difficult. But it's worked, man, and it's awesome to see.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Something that is catching my eye behind you, that Rebuilding Milo, and I'm so excited to get it in my hands and have a
Thank
little
you.
flick
Thank
through,
you.
man.
Yeah.
Talk to us about a little bit about the story behind it. I know the
Mhm.
OG absolute meatheads will know the story, but some people
Yeah.
might not know the story. And then why write a book?
Yeah. So first off, I guess the name of the book is Rebuilding Milo. Now, most people off the top of their head, they go, "Who is Milo?" Or some people may go, "Oh, Milo, I've heard that name before." Well, it's in reference to one of the ancient Greek wrestlers who was considered by many to be sort of the pinnacle of athletic ability at the time, Milo of Croton. And as the story goes, he won many Olympiads in the wrestling, and from a young age, when he was training, he would pick up a small calf, put it on his shoulders, and walk around with it. And then as the calf grew in size, so did Milo's strength. To where one day he was picking up a full-grown bull that weighed like 900 plus pounds. And if you actually read into the mythology about it, apparently Milo even took the bull, walked it down to the Olympiad Stadium, walked around the stadium, killed it with a sword, and like ate it in front of people or something like that. It's sort of funny, but that's not part of the book. So the idea basically is that Milo's story of lifting the small calf onto his shoulders every single day, and then as the calf grew in size, so did Milo's strength. That sort of set the precedent for what we consider to be periodization. So if you are in any exercise science class, you will learn of the story of Milo as a way to talk about progressive overload. So that's sort of the science behind how we gain strength, is you have to lift heavier and heavier. Now, obviously, that's a little bit of mythology, but behind it is good science as far as we need to progressively overload the body. Now, the thing is that whenever we are going into the weight room, we're always trying to be our own version of Milo. We're always trying to gain strength. But unfortunately, there's this double-edged sword to the way in which we approach the weight room, is that the competitive nature within us is always pushing us to do, one more set, one more rep, put 10 more pounds on the bar. We're always pushing ourselves because we love the competitive nature of lifting big weights. But because of that, often we succumb to injuries. And I'm not talking about big traumatic injuries like a torn ACL or something, but they're small and they're nagging, and sometimes they get long lasting or chronic, to where, I mean, you meet anyone that's been in the game of lifting heavy things for a while, and everyone's, well, my left elbow's achy, or, I got a bad back, or my right knee's been aching me for a while. And it's because We're not machines, we're human. And we're constantly trying to teeter around having great programming, but then also trying to limit poor technique and trying to play off the two. So aches and pains happen. It's a reality in the game. So my goal with this book was basically to give everyone the answers, give you my complete approach as a physio of how I approach treating injuries. If you come to me with back pain, this is how I treat you. And I want to give that and spell it all out plainly for each and every athlete that loves lifting so that you can work yourself when you don't have a great professional to work with to help understand your injury, why it happened, how to get yourself out of pain through proper screening, evaluation, exercise, movements, not just laying in a chair on a bed and getting passive modalities or manipulations or Graston technique, not getting any of that done to you, actually fixing the cause of pain so that you can get out of it and get back to doing what you love to do, which is rebuilding your body into becoming your own version of Milo. So that's sort of the idea was I want to give you a step-by-step blueprint process in which I treat athletes. And what it would do is let's say you have back pain one day, you turn to the back pain chapter, you learn about pain, you learn about how it occurs from an anatomical perspective. So you get a little bit of a background, again, in a way in which anyone can understand. Then you go through some screens and tests and you understand, okay, here's why I have back pain, because there's no one size fits all. This isn't a back pain, do this. You learn about why your injury occurred. You learn about what you need to do to get yourself out of injury and sort of build your own story type of a book to then here's the exercises based on what you found to get yourself out of pain.
Mm.
So yeah, that's sort of the idea behind the book. And I tried to market it as the way of being like, this is who I am. This is what I can give you to empower you to get out of pain. Because I think most of the injuries that we sustain as strength athletes, most of this aches and pains, it's like having a light bulb go out in your house. It's not a huge medical necessity or, emergency, but you should have the ability to change that light bulb without calling an electrician. So I think in the same way, when you get elbow pain from back squatting, when you get knee pain from deadlifting, like you should be able to take the first steps to addressing those problems. You shouldn't always have to go to a medical doctor who most of the time, not saying all the time, most of the time nowadays is going to go, oh, you deadlift heavy twice a week. Not why are you doing that? That's why you have back pain. Stop deadlifting and take this ibuprofen. Or maybe you do find a medical professional that specializes in rehab, like a physio or a chiropractor, an athletic trainer. But again, they don't approach things from sort of this movement first, fix the cause type of view. And they are like, well, lay on the bed and let me crack your back and let me do some Graston technique on your knee and do some dry needling and don't ever get you up and moving and watch you deadlift or watch you squat. So I wanted to really say like, hey, this is how I do things. I found this to be extremely helpful in my approach, not only in treating athletes for the last decade at a very high level in my own practice, but these are all things that I have done myself in being a weightlifter myself, tried and true, these things work. But then also is, again, I'm not coming up with this all on my own. This is me literally standing on the shoulders of giants who have come before me. Dr. Kelly Starrett, who wrote the book Becoming a Supple Leopard, Dr. Stuart McGill, Shirley Sahrman, so many other great physios, chiropractors, strength and conditioning coaches, athletes themselves. I take and I pull from all these great minds who have come before us to sort of meld it all together and be like, this is, in my opinion, the Bible of what a strength athlete should have on their shelf so that when they do sustain an injury, because it will come at some point, this is something that you don't have to worry about because you have the information at your fingertips. You just scroll through, you find the chapter that you want to work on, and you don't have to have that frustration for a long time. Obviously, injuries are frustrating. I've had so many as a weightlifter. I've had the bad back that limited my ability to work out for a couple weeks. I've had knee pain that's so gripping a couple weeks out before a national competition that I'm like, why is this knee hurting? I don't know what to do to get better. I've tried foam rolling, I've tried this, and it's not getting better. Well, the way in which I wrote this is to be like, hey, it's going to be okay. Do these screens, figure out why your pain is there. Now you can take the first steps to getting out of pain.
And
So
that's
that's
so
sort of
important.
what the book has been about.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's so important, like finding the source of the problem. You know, many people put a plaster on a broken leg and be like, "Ah, it's fine." You know, smashing the old ibuprofen route, and it's like,
Mm.
that's going to treat the symptoms, but it's not going to treat the cause of it, which isn't the wisest of approaches. And it's kind of like make do amend type mindset when it comes to a strength training individual. So yeah, like individualized approach, being like figure out your shit, like figure out what your body does and
Yeah.
kind of decipher the messages that it's sending you. That's all that pain is, right? It's just a signal being like, hey, something's kind of like a little bit off here that you should probably have a little look at and think about. And I think it's so important to have that Bible to quote yourself of like, hey, flick through this. You don't have to read it cover to cover. Just like decipher what's going on in yourself, flick through this, have a little read, and then go out on the gym floor and figure it out. Because movement is medicine, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, mate. Like I cannot wait to then start. Like I'm gonna be opening up like a little rehabilitation clinic out working in a gym. So I can't wait to have that on the shelf and
Nice.
being like, hey,
I
yeah, come
appreciate it,
see
man.
me.
I appreciate it.
Awesome. But come read this. It's there, you know, like pick it up, have a little flick through, have a little read. Like I think gyms should have bookshelves and little book swaps in them. Like
I agree. Yeah.
that's how we learn, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
I agree.
I can't wait. And then the one next to it, the one behind you.
Oh, the Squat Bible?
Yeah, talk to me.
Yeah. So the Squat Bible was my first book that I wrote, actually. Yes, that was 2017 when it came out. Yeah, that was my very first book. That book basically was how to squat and learn how to fix problems in your squat in 128 pages. So it's a
Wow.
much shorter book than the first one. But it goes off the idea of the joint by joint approach, which is something that Dr. Or Gray Cook, who wrote the book Movement,
Mhm.
Lee Burton, a number of other, Mike Boyle's been a part of that. But it's basically looking at the body and understanding that each joint complex has a very specific role in fulfilling optimal movement. So when we look at our feet, they're some of the most mobile complexes in our entire body. 27 bones, hundreds of muscles and tendons and ligaments all combined together. But yet when we perform a squat or a deadlift, we want that structure to become stable to provide a platform for the rest of your body to move on top of. The ankle needs to be very mobile, but in a lot of people has a tendency to become stiff. And so on up the body, we have mobile joints moving on top of stable complexes. And that understanding allows us then to screen the body to see where our deficiencies are in creating problem movements. So let's say you're like, I want to get better at my squat. Well, you can use the information that I showed in the Squat Bible basically to break down your body and understand, okay, my problem in squatting deep isn't because my hips, it's because of my ankles. And I now know because I've done these screens and tests. So it's ways to illuminate problems and then gives you a couple different tips as to how to improve that. So these are the things really that I share on social media for free every single day.
Mm.
I just sort of bundle them together for a simple, quick flip through, in a manual. But yeah, the Squat Bible was my first book that I released in 2017, and then obviously Rebuilding Milo came out just a couple months ago in January.
Again, it's really important to have those little short snippets, right? Because the internet is is vast, you know, like you can easily get lost in it and you're like, oh, where was that thing I kind of glanced at 2 months ago that I can remember helping me, but I can't remember what it is. It's like, no, it's here. It's in 128 pages. Flick
Uh-huh.
through it. It's in your gym anyway. Have a little read through. You mentioned that Supple Leopard. That is a
Yeah.
fantastic book.
Oh yeah, Kelly's awesome. I mean, gosh, Becoming a Supple Leopard is a book that I pre-ordered it when it came out, and that was like 2011, maybe
Mm,
2010 or something like that. I remember I was such a big fan of Kelly's when he started his mobility project 365 back in the day, where he was making a video every single day on YouTube. And this is before we had like video cameras on our phones.
yeah.
It was a while back. And yeah, when he came out, he's like, "Oh, I've got a book," and I was like, "Boom, bought." Like it was huge. It was integral in my early learning as a physical therapist. So yeah,
Mm.
that's definitely one that I recommend if I had a top five or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. I remember picking it up in an actual gym I was training at the time. I went on to coach in the gym, but I remember picking up and having a flick through, and I was like, "Oh, what is this? Like a supple leopard? That sounds cool." And
Yeah.
having a little read through it, I was like, "Holy shit! Like this is mind blowing." Like
Yeah.
everyone who's just into the whole health and fitness scene, right? Never
Mhm.
mind like coaching in it, physical therapist, whatever domain you use, everyone should be picking this up and having a little read and then be like, oh, okay, I understand like my body and how it works and how it should be working.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's the idea behind it is that, and this goes for really anything, is that, you don't have to be a world-class power lifter or have aspirations to be a competitive weightlifter to be in the gym and to
Hmm.
move. And I think that's why we have so many issues as a society nowadays, is because we view a lot of the stuff that we do in the gym as only an athletic pursuit, in that it's a human pursuit first. Being able to pick something heavy off the ground is not something we only do for athletics or only do for the sake of a big deadlift to put it on Instagram or something. Like that's moving a big box in your garage or lifting your grandkid off the floor. So why are we not training it? Every single person that can get up and move should be training for life. So
Mm.
like a lot of the stuff that we talk about, yes, I talk to the power lifter and the weightlifter and the CrossFitter, to the fitness enthusiast, but it's something that I try to preach to people that like, this is something for life. This is not just something that you do when you're 20 to 40 years old. You should be doing this 60, 70, 80. And so Kelly's book was the first to just be like movement, and the way in which we approach fitness is something that is not just tailored to just athletes, but something that is just as human uh, nature that we all should be experiencing.
I totally agree. So if I was to ask you a question of um give us a quick rundown of what you would give someone who's never trained before and you'd be like, hey Aaron, I kind of want to get a little bit fitter, a little bit healthier, but I just want to get better at life. What would be the short list of movements that you'd be like, okay, cool. Everyone needs to be able to do this.
I mean, I would say just off the top of my head, we would do squats, deadlifts. We would probably learn like a lunge like pattern or like a Bulgarian split squat in a kettlebell swing, maybe even a kettlebell snatch, really, because I think it's much easier to learn a kettlebell snatch than like a barbell snatch. But yeah, I would say like straight off the bat, um, and then maybe even like a loaded carry, like a suitcase carry, because I think right there you're gonna hit just your basic movement patterns.
Hmm.
You're squatting, you're deadlifting, you're hinging, you're performing something that's slow, but then also something that's fast and dynamic. So you're working coordination as well in there and sort of linking the body, especially with the kettlebell snatch that I think is so important. So yeah, I think those are sort of the fundamentals that are human in nature, not necessarily competitive sport in nature.
Yeah, that's huge. And then if the individual wanted to branch out and be like, okay, cool, I want to get more into the quote unquote aesthetic scene, then you can build upon that. But this is going to be the base of your pyramid, right? And what you see in
Mhm.
or what you couldn't see before the blow up of CrossFit and the whole functional
Mhm.
scene, where people are like, okay, let's do some GPP stuff.
Yeah.
Um, is they kind of sit on a machine. They sit on the fixed, movement pattern, and then you take them out into life, and they're screwed. They can't
Very
move, or
true.
they
Yeah.
move like dysfunctionally. And like, what would you suggest to individuals like that might have just been, the bro splits or kind of only just do those types of movements for 10, 20, 30 years maybe?
Yeah, I would say it's the difference between bodybuilding versus training to be an athlete.
Hmm.
I'll say it like that. And now, obviously, some people say, be like, "Oh, bodybuilders are athletes." I understand that, but the idea is like when you are training for bodybuilding, specifically the sport of bodybuilding or fitness competitors, they are training to shape the body. They are there to literally chisel away and make this muscle a little bit bigger and enhance this. And yes, they do use compound movements often in that training, but it's the end goal. The end goal is to make the bicep bigger, to make this more accentuated for the ideal of building form. Now, when I say training an athlete, I'm saying training movement. When you approach, let's say, the quads, right? lower leg. You could have the biggest freaking quads in the world and be a horrible kicker in football, right? Or you could have the biggest quads in the world and not necessarily be a great squatter. So there's a difference between form versus function. That's why the whole functional training sort of came to be. Is it's like when we say functional training, we mean just movement. It's the ability to control one's body through fully, like under your control, not having any assistance with, for example, when you're using a machine, you are using the machine to assist a specific type of movement. So if you're using a Smith machine, there's completely takes away the need to balance your body. That's the entirety of the squat, is to balance the hips and the knees and the trunk and the spine and everything together through the feet. That is the squat. That's why it's a fundamental human movement. The second you put a barbell to track on a specific motion, which is the Smith machine, you completely negate the ability to coordinate oneself. So then it becomes a bodybuilding type movement in that you are focusing specifically more so on building form rather than building movement quality. So I would say to those who are, just going in there to lift and to get bigger, like if that's your goal, that's fine. But don't think that just because you have bigger muscles that you can move better. And it's something that's necessarily going to help you build capacity for life. Because we see plenty of people who have developed great muscles, yet have poor movement. And then also it doesn't carry over to anything else that, to a greater degree, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you find on average it ends up hindering them down the line, whether it's in everyday life or whether it's performance wise or anything like that? Do you feel like...
I don't know necessarily if it would hinder them in everyday life. I think more so performance, it definitely can. You see a lot of athletes that spend way more time trying to build their muscles and build their arms, and their balance sucks. Their coordination sucks. All right, you get done with your main like squat deadlift, rather than maybe go do some sets of curls or leg extensions. If you're trying to be an athlete, go do some single leg RDLs, do some Turkish get-ups, do some farmer walks, do something that is going to help you become a better mover. And in doing so, it's going to actually build bigger muscles that way as well. You will become more aesthetic in your form, not because you are focusing on building form, but because you are actually training your body through movements, but under load. So that's a secondary adaptation to the way in which you're training your body. That's not the main goal, but it's something that happens. So a lot of times people will look at these great athletes and be like, wow, they're ripped. They must spend a lot of time training like a bodybuilder, but that's often not the case. It's an adaptation that happens secondary to performing basic quality movements under load.
I also think psychologically for the athlete too, it's a lot better having that as a secondary outcome, mainly because they're not obsessing over it all the time. So they're not in their head. Yeah. They're like focusing on, okay, how well am I moving today? Is my form and my technique getting better? Is the load getting better? Am I able to do things? Am I balanced? Blah, 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 blah. Because you see people just get super obsessed, of like, oh my God, how do I look? I'm like, okay, cool. Like you're obsessing about that, but at the same time, like your body like can't move the way it was supposed to move.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's what I've definitely picked up on over the years of coaching with people. I'm like, keep that as a secondary thing, and if you can focus on that performance and your body's ability to move, everything else just kind of follows suit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So
I would 100% agree.
Do you work with
first? Movement is medicine, and it'll, good things will happen.
100% movement is medicine. Like that should be in the forefront of everyone's mind, especially coming into this thing. Okay, like you can get into, it's kind of like a cat in headlights, right? When you start on this journey, like, oh my God, there's so much information out there, and like, where do I start? What do I do? Do I go do step classes Zumba, or do I go like balls deep into CrossFit, or do I go be a power lifter, or like, what do I do? It's really scary. It's like, okay, cool. Movement is medicine. Just move. Like focus on like moving well, and you'll be all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you work with more athletes, or do you work with more everyday Joes, as we'll call them?
I would say athletes, but in the sake of saying it's not necessarily like your high school baseball player. That's every single person. Like I will see your 35-year-old doctor who loves to do CrossFit. You know what I'm saying? So I will see a variety of people that may not be the high school baseball player, the college football player, but they are always athletes themselves. So I've been able to create a situation where most of the people that are coming to me are athletes just in their own way. Maybe not traditional sports anymore, but they still love lifting. They love competing. Maybe not always on the traditional sports. But yeah, I do work with a number of powerlifters, weightlifters, CrossFitters, and then your traditional sports. I had, a tackle from the in the NFL last year, which was awesome to work with. And I've worked with a number of people in most sports, Major League Baseball, the NBA, soccer, everything like that. But I find I enjoy more so the strength athletes. That's where I really have a lot of fun.
Goes back to your roots, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you see any like patterns come up with any spots of like major like dysfunctional parts of the body?
I would say it depends on the sport, but injuries cluster around sports for sure. For example, you see in the sport of powerlifting, it's common to have sort of flexion and load related injuries where the lifter is lifting too heavy too often and not stabilizing their back necessarily enough and allowing more rounding to occur within the back. So you get more of those type of injuries in the sport of powerlifting. Within CrossFit, sometimes we get a lot of fatigue related issues where technique breaks down, which then leads to leads to the injury. So one of the big thing is in the sport of CrossFit is movement education and teaching them, how to build capacity within that technique scope so that they can do more and more, because in CrossFit they're doing 30 snatches within as quick as possible. So the second that technique starts to falter, injury risk goes up. So we see very different types of injuries in the sport of CrossFit than the sport of powerlifting, but still you have to understand the mechanism of injury, and education is key as far as how you are going to teach them about the injury, how it happened, and then get out of it.
Is there any common injuries with like everyday Joes?
Oh man, I mean, I would say just the common places that you'll find injuries: shoulders, back, hips, and knees. I mean, those are just the most common places you'll see in any single person. Those are the most common injury sites.
Yeah, and I bet you're gonna see a lot of people that are like desk ridden, right? That are always either in a car or on a desk, and they're like, "Oh, my back hurts, my hips hurt." I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
no wonder.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a society nowadays that breeds comfort, and we are constantly sitting and not moving enough. So yeah, you see a lot of issues that can be prevented with just proper movement, getting up and moving more often. Like you said, movement is medicine, but it's the right kind of movement, and understanding like if I sit for 8 hours a day, I need to be able to undo that. And getting a standing desk or being up and moving, that's why standing desks are so much better than sitting, because it gives you the option to move. Not that standing is that much better than sitting, but standing allows you to move. You're shifting your weight, you're up on your heels, you're up on your toes, like you can move. Whereas sitting, you're just like static. And when you're doing things for a long time, your body adapts to that positively or negatively. And I think we often live in a culture nowadays where we only think of movement as something that I do for an hour a day at the gym. I mean, how many times, anyone listening to this, ask yourself the question: how often do you sit in a deep squat throughout the day? Most people will be like, "Oh, I never do that." I mean, I go to the gym, I sort of stretch a little bit before I start my squat workout, but I'm never sitting in a deep squat. You should be sitting in a deep squat often throughout your day, because again, the squat is a movement ever before it's an exercise. And it's a fundamental human movement that literally, as funny as it's here, is to hear, if you don't use it, you lose it. And when it comes to the squat, we are rarely ever in that bottom position Whereas if you look at a lot of different people that live in sort of those third world countries, or just places where culturally they haven't lost it. You know, you go to China and go sit, you know, watch people at a bus stop or something. There's people sitting in a deep squat. My co-author of both my books, Kevin Santana, his parents are from Laos, and his mother will often sit in a deep squat, you know, preparing food or things like that. You know, it's something that it shouldn't be lost on us, but often is. And I think when you start regaining that, you see a lot of problems disappear. You know, look at the amount of people that have back pain in countries like that, and it's much lower than our industrialized societies where we sit in chairs all day and think of the squat only as an exercise and not as a movement.
100%. Like, I remember I went through a stage where I'd sit at the bottom of the squat for a long period at a time, maybe 4 to 5 minutes, like every day. Honest to God, my hips have never felt better.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, well, you know, it's magic. It must be magic.
Exactly.
No, you're just moving as it's intended, you know, like just sit at the bottom of the squat, feel it out. Use a kettlebell if you need to, if there's a little bit of a counterweight, you know, as a balance. Yeah, mate.
Exactly.
Squat University, what made you want to go hard on that as an educational tool and to be able to spread it globally now? Like it's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, the name, I guess, it just sort of dawned on me as, you know, when I would see these athletes day in and day out, I would constantly be doing different tests and measures and asking people, hey, get up and move. And it became something I was like, deja vu like scenario where the squat was first and foremost this problem that so many people had. So I was like, I'm going to start calling things Squat University. I was like, that'd be interesting because it's the squat, the fundamental human movement that I think so many people have lost. But when you regain that ability, it helps so many other things. And university, because my goal is to help teach, help educate. And I've always been a very outgoing social person. And I really wanted to get into the field of physical therapy and make a change and help a lot of people. And when I first got in the field, I thought that was done through doing a lot of research, a lot of scientific research. And what I found was not many people, plus like your mom and maybe a few other exercise science nerds like myself, are actually reading these research articles. You know, like you work for months and months and months and sometimes years to get a research article done, and you write it and, you know, get it published finally and through the review process. And then you're like, awesome. And barely anyone's read that. So I'm like, am I really making the impact that I want to make in the world? So I was like, I need to change things up. So I try to simplify the way that I wrote, simplify the way that I spoke to people, and just started talking to the world and building a brand that is based in education and empowering others to move better, lift big weights, and have fun with it. So yeah, I just started using social media in a little bit different way than I already had been doing. I mean, I think you know, how old are you right now?
I'm coming up to 25.
25. So you were still a baby when Facebook was born. But Facebook started when I was in senior year of high school. So like my first year of college was the first year that like everyone had Facebook, but you had to have like an edu, you know, .edu. I had to have a school password or email address to get on Facebook. So like, you know, social media just sort of like blew up like when I was in college. So it became like second nature for me just to always be on it and exploring and connecting with people. And I enjoyed that aspect of creating. So whenever I sort of decided to start speaking to the world, it was a lot of fun, and it was easy for me to easy-ish, I guess you would say, to start making content just on every single platform. So now, I mean, I spend most of my days, most people don't realize, like I'm still seeing patients like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. But I create content like all the other hours. I'm constantly on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, you know, every single social media platform, just to have fun with it.
And that's the thing now. It's kind of evolved from yourself into this brand. And I think people look at Squat Uni and be like, okay, Squat University said this. I'm going to start adapting that mindset and that methodology, and
Yeah.
I'm going to start kind of altering the way I move, or altering the way I coach, or altering the way I
Yeah.
think about my own training. And I've seen it like on the gym floor. It's like it's no longer just one man as yourself, like beating the drum, being like, hey guys, like probably fix your shit because it's gonna come back and hurt you like later down the
Yeah.
line. And now it's like, oh, now it's kind of it's gained a bit of momentum, and it's a snowball effect, right? And it's
Yeah.
awesome to see, mate.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. It's a lot of fun. A lot of people don't realize like it's still just me like making stuff
Mm.
myself. They're like, oh, like I'm sure someone else answers your emails for you. I'm like, nope, just me. So people are surprised when I respond to them on Instagram. They're like, oh wow, I didn't think you'd ever respond. I'm like, I try to get back to as many people as possible. I get thousands of messages a day, but
Yeah.
I try to sit and talk to as many people as possible. But yeah, it's really cool to see things change. And I know there's a lot of work still yet to be done. So still going to go strong. But yeah, I enjoy every day of it.
Where would you like to see things go?
I mean, I think the big thing is just continuing to see athletes take the lighter weights more seriously, take warm ups more seriously, understand that it's not just about lifting heavy weights, although that's a lot of fun and we love competing, just to approach training with a little bit more systematic approach and having patience. It's an ongoing process because it's a constant battle that we all have within ourselves. I mean, we love lifting heavy weights. That's why we do things. But to constantly take one step closer to being a little bit more sustainable with the way in which we lift, I think is sort of my ongoing purpose.
Mm. I couldn't agree more with that. Like it's usually it's either the eccentric, the lowering phase, maybe on a deadlift, on a warm up set, or it is just the warm up set in general when people aren't taking it seriously. Like, oh, it's fine, it's like 50% or whatever it is, and they're just like slanging it around. You're like, that's probably where you're gonna hurt yourself because you're not
Mhm.
concentrating. You're thinking about what you're gonna make for your dinner and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. And then if someone wanted to embark on this study on the fitness industry, whether it is being out on the floor as a trainer or being behind the scenes and being as a physical therapist and studying that way, where would you send someone who's right at the beginning of the journey? What would you tell them to do?
I mean, the big thing is really finding a lot of people who you aspire to be and then learning everything that you can from them. So, like, I mean, when I was growing up, it was learning from people like Kelly Starrett and Gray Cook and people like that. So I would literally watch every single one of their videos. I would read every one of their books. I would learn as much as I can from them without actually having to be in front of them. Because what you would do years and years ago is you would actually try to go fly out to them and say, hey, can I follow you around for a couple weeks? Can I learn from you? Well, nowadays there's so much content on the internet. Just got to find, take your time to find people who you like and really try to learn as much from them, learn their methodologies, understand why they learn or why they say the things that they do. And yeah, that's the biggest thing is just immersing yourself in the world of where you want to be, and then try it out. Try, going and learning and shadowing a strength conditioning coach. A lot of people are cool with you shadowing them as long as you're nice about it and asking like, hey, please, can I shadow you? I'll bring you a coffee every
Mm.
single day for the next week. People are very eager to share their stuff.
That's it. Like just seeing different people take different approaches, right? And having the
Yeah.
conversations like we're doing now, like you
Yeah.
learn so much, and that's exactly what I say, and it's exactly what I did with the whole social media and learning from people. It's just like always surround yourself with that.
Hmm.
Like I remember when it must have been like I think I stumbled on Squat University when it was about 4,000 and something followers on it. I was like, wow,
Yeah. It's a
this
while
is
ago.
awesome. Like this, but kind of
Yeah.
looking through, and then I had a look like 2 minutes before we jumped on. I was like, 1.8? Holy fuck. Like, where's this gone? Like,
Yeah.
like back in the
I
day,
mean,
like kind of
I'm entirely grateful. I remember the first time when I hit like 500 followers. I was like, holy shit! Like, 500 people are following the stuff that I'm making. Like, that's really cool. So, I mean, I'm entirely grateful for the way things have gone.
mm,
It's a really cool trip to be on.
mm. But it's awesome, man. You see it everywhere. You see the little snippets, like the little Twitter quotes kind of just like pinging around, which
Yeah.
always works. You see that now the little TikToks that are awesome. You see it everywhere, and it's like
Yeah.
it works. That's why it is working. I know it sounds really daft, but like it definitely works.
Thank you. Thank you.
I really appreciate your time, brother.
Hey, thank you for having me on the podcast, man. I really appreciate it. It's been a fun conversation.
Nah, thank you very much. And if you ever down in New Zealand way, Australia way, like let me know and
Man,
we'll
yeah,
get a
I'd
coffee,
love
get
to
a
come
lift
out there
in.
one day for
Oh, you
sure.
got to. You got it, mate.
All right, man.
All right, take it easy. I know you got a busy day, so I won't keep you any longer.
Cool. All right, man. Thank you so much again for having me on the show.
Take it easy, man. Thank you.
See ya.
See you later.